Right. Well, thank you to everyone in the task force who contributed to this video message that really gives you the main messages of our task force. So my job is simple. What I want to first start off and let you know is that in the task force, different members took the leads on different issues, on looking at our four main sets of recommendations that have been turned into resolutions for you, and that are also accompanied by more detailed parish by parish analysis in the full report, as well as step-by-step practical recommendations. So the four areas that we're looking at, solidarity with migrants and refugees in need, was led by Austin from Rome. Then we had the work on digital outreach to newcomers that I led on with input also from Walter Bayer. Then in the area on bearing witness to migrants and refugees, we had Shari Brown, who was our keynote speaker at the Academy of Parish Leadership, who became an observer in our task force and helped gather together the best materials and recommendations there. And then on looking at welcoming, we had two experiences from Kim from the cathedral in Paris and Wasim from Wiesbaden. We also had Elise, who reached out with me to the task force on youth and children to think about the role that Sunday school has to play. And I'd like to thank Carol for keeping the links with the Council of Advice, and to all of you who have filled in the questionnaire that we used to assess where strategies are present in the different parishes. That allowed us to find a lot of really great practices, but also great divergences within the convocation, which means that we have a space for learning from each other, from, as I said, parishes large, medium, and small. And it was great to have feedback, particularly from Clermont-Ferrand, where they have done a lot in actually all four of these key areas. So if I can just share my screen, I wanted to walk you through some of the key points of the report and the resolutions, but I need that to be enabled for me to share my screen. Um, so while I'm waiting for that, let me give you the key. Here we are. Here we are. All right. So a key overview for those of you of our full report. You will have seen the executive summary that was included in the pack. Our full report is 40 pages. Because there was such experience in our task force, and there were a lot of practical next steps that can be undertaken. So the full report, as I said, really gives you the parish by parish analysis and specific recommendations. So this is a full overview of what you'll find in the report. What we did, we drew on the answers that you provided to us about where you have strategies in the various areas. We also looked at your social media and websites to get a fuller update. We had the Academy of Parish Leadership, and then each of the task force members gathered together specific recommendations that formed the basis of this report. So we see that there are four overall goals for the Episcopal Church in Europe. The first is obviously providing charitable outreach to migrants and refugees and all others in need. And actually, the majority of the parishes here in Europe do have strategies and partners that they work with. So this is a strength in our approach. But of course, it's now a time to perhaps update those charitable outreach strategies based on the new needs that have emerged with COVID, needs that we can see within our own parishes, where we have many people of who are not locals, who are experiencing very different types of challenges. And that might help us to talk with migrants, local partners, and update our charitable approach. But what if you take any key message out of this report, it is this: Working with migrants and refugees cannot be reduced to charity. We are a church of immigrants, of people who have moved to our countries, who have moved into the Episcopal Church, and who are religious in secular societies. And the future of the Episcopal Church in Europe requires us to be reaching out to new members and new leaders, so that people can benefit, of course, from our charitable outreach and know about the work that we're doing, but also so that they know that we exist, that we are part of their communities, and that they are welcome to join our communities. And this is where we saw that there were gaps in many parishes' approaches on the next three key points. But again, we have best practices and very feasible practical next steps that can be pursued. So the second goal is in terms of digital outreach. Um, Unfortunately, the main way that people find out about our parishes is through word of mouth. They know the Episcopal Church already. They know someone who goes to our churches. And that excludes a large number of people who are not going to take that big step into the unknown on a Sunday into a strange community. So now that digital communication has become essential in all of our parishes with COVID, it's a moment to revamp our communications strategies, and to revamp our websites and our social media, um, based on two big ideas. So, are we trying to build community with the stranger? If you look at your website and at your social media, is it clear that our churches are actually for the stranger? Or do we send the message that actually our church is primarily for the existing community? And we give you a very simple checklist that you can go through to reassess your website and social media. And we've actually done that as well for you. So you can see where your websites and social media could improve in terms of sharing your community with the stranger. But also, our online identity speaks to what kind of church we are. Is this a church that is primarily for people who know what the Episcopal Church is, and for people who are native English speakers? Or do we invite people to join our community? And do we try and show our local links and our connections? Do we actually explain how we ourselves are a local church and who we partner with? And again, we give you a very practical checklist, and we've already assessed your websites and social media to see how you could improve building your online identity. This is an area where the communications committee of the convocation can be helpful in the future. Um, but I want you to also understand that there is an enormous potential here. The report includes statistics that we made using Facebook to see in your local area, um, what are the number of people in your local area who are born in the United States, who are maybe interested in the Anglican Church, or who actually already follow different English speaking churches? And as the video said, there are actually thousands of people who fit that criteria, and who you could more easily reach through digital outreach. The third goal is witness. Many of our parishes do bear witness to the experience of migrants and refugees, and are trying to also involve the diversity of the parish in their worship. But a lot of these measures are ad hoc and are based on news developments or specific moments in the liturgical calendar. Here, we've tried to help you have a more systematic approach. So we've looked at where in the liturgical calendar and in international days, you might want to build in a specific service that relates to migrants and refugees. And also that perhaps acknowledge the diversity of your parish by celebrating specific days that are relevant for your parishioners. And we've also given you materials, worship materials that you can use to more systematically bear witness. So prayers, poems, hymns that relate to the experience of migrants and refugees, and in particular, prayers and hymns that are written by migrants and refugees themselves as spiritual leaders. So I really thank Shari for bringing together these materials, and hopefully we will have more in the future. The last goal, again, where we could be more systematic in our approach, is in welcoming new members and new leaders. So, what happens when a newcomer crosses the threshold and joins our parish? Who is there to welcome them? And while a number of our parishes have people in the roles of greeters, we actually saw that the role of greeter is not necessarily that well defined and is limited. So we looked at some of the best practices that exist within the convocation, and we recommend then that parishes appoint someone as a welcomer, whose role is to talk to every newcomer that comes in, answer their questions, find out what their talents and interests are, inform them of opportunities for training, for volunteering, to become more active, organize events and contacts so that newcomers connect with other parishioners and with leaders. And this can be beneficial for the leadership and worship of the parish in many ways, including finding new volunteers for Sunday school. And if you want to know more about how your parish can make this transition, because welcoming is a long-term process, I really highly recommend this resource by Stephanie Spellers, who is a canon to the presiding bishop. And she has looked at welcoming parishes in the United States, welcoming great diversity of people, to understand what are the practical steps that they made in order to become welcoming. And all of her materials are available online for free, that allow you or parishioners to start a reflective process to change your practices and to reflect on how your parish can become more inclusive. So just to briefly give you a walk through what we're asking the convocation to adopt as resolutions, the task force on migrants and refugees would end this year. But our 40 pages give you very practical and feasible next steps of what you can be doing at a parish level. And we want to make sure that you take in the findings of this report and then make your own choices in your own context for how you will move forward. So we are asking after convention for the parish leaders to read our report and to reflect over the next year on what will be their strategy. So based on the report and a lot of the benchmarking that we've done of what your parish is doing compared to others, what is your parish going to do in rethinking its charitable outreach, its digital outreach, its welcoming, and its witness? The second main area, now is really the right time to revamp our digital communications, given how essential they are for our parish life. So we are asking that each parish, again, look at the findings of the report and the good practices and checklists that are provided. And we want the communications committee of the convocation to be in touch with you, using the report to have a discussion about how you could revamp your website and your social media. And based on that, we want you to decide how you will do this by creating a communication strategy, which maybe your parish doesn't have, but is basically trying to take a step back and say, well, who are we trying to reach in our local community as new members? What are the ways that we are going to try and do that? And then, after a year, we can see what kind of progress we have made in doing that. And again, we are asking that the communications committee be there as a resource to offer you advice, perhaps to also develop common templates or common materials that might be needed, as some parishes, of course, have limited means for doing their social media outreach. And indeed, actually, we did find several parishes that lacked a website and social media. The third main area, as I said, we ask that each parish appoint at least one welcomer, and that this welcomer attend a training that we task force members will offer based on again, the existing great experience that we have from places like Wiesbaden and Clermont-Ferrand, so that you can understand who and how a welcomer can improve your welcoming approach. That's better described in the report. And that this welcomer then regularly report to vestry and to kind of a coordinating body within the convocation on how we can improve our welcoming approach. In our last area of bearing witness, we're asking that the convocation provide some of these free multilingual worship materials that might exist, or perhaps others related to migration and refugees, so that we at least have a common depository that we can use, and to assess whether parishes might actually want more multilingual worship materials to be developed in the future. We ask that each of your parishes make sure that you have local partners that you can turn to when you have questions on bearing witness. When you want to do an action on migrants and refugees, it's very important that you have a partner in your local context. We ask that each parish have at least one day a year when they celebrate the experience of migrants and refugees, and the most appropriate would be World Refugee Day, which happens on, June 20th. That's a typo here. But we corrected it in the official version, don't worry. So to use these materials that we've made available on bearing witness to the experience of migrants and refugees, and to make sure that at least one day a year you are providing that in your parish. And for the convocation to have its own partner on migrants and refugees, we are asking that the convocation join the Church's Commission for Migrants in Europe, CCME. Shari Brown is the executive secretary of CCME. CCME is the body of churches in Europe that work on migrants and refugees. So all of the national Protestant churches, the Methodists, the Anglican Church, and their related bodies are all members of this one group that are doing advocacy at the EU level, supporting their members that want to do advocacy at the national level, but also networking them together so that your parishes would actually know who they could be partnering with as other church and ecumenical partners in your country. And also CCME is supporting its members to do actions of witness and welcoming. So the convocation can learn a lot. And then just lastly, we know that someone will have to take over the reins for the task force. And so we are asking that at the convocation level, we are gathering information from the parishes on the outcomes of your work on welcoming and digital outreach. And we are asking that the convocation appoint officers for welcoming migrants. So kind of a contact point, maybe one or two from our parishes who can be linking welcomers together and working to make sure that these resolutions are properly implemented and we are seeing the changes that we want to see in the future. So I remain available to you now for any questions that you have on the resolutions, on the report, on particular ideas that you have for improving your parish's welcoming approach. Thank you very much.
Wow, Tom, thank you so much. At this point, we're moving to open discussion, and I might suggest we have 90 participants on the call. I might suggest people should feel free to ask you anything they want to ask, and they should ask. I'm looking to Malia here. How do we want to do this? In the Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen, folks, you're going to see a little icon called Q&A. That's the place to put your question to Dr. Huddleston. And I think, Tom, that you can see these questions as they come in. If you can't, you can, okay, great. Thanks for that nod. And I might suggest that, folks, as you think about your questions for the task force, focus them on the resolutions that have been proposed. That way, tomorrow, when we go to considering our resolutions, we won't have to take time kind of repeating what Thomas has just shared with us. And he'll be able right now to sort of frame his answers in terms of the resolutions that the task force has offered. I just want to say thanks for a terrific report. Wow, is that ever something? And I'm really excited about thinking how we carry this work forward in the convocation. So there's a world of participants out there, some of whom will have questions. Please use the Q&A function and send your questions in. Thomas, while we're waiting, I want to ask you this question. You have a resolution that you've proposed that would have the convocation take on the role of identifying somebody who's kind of the principal point of reference for Ministry to Migrants and Refugees at the convocation level. Do you have an idea of where you see that fitting in our structure? Where is it the creation of a new structure, or is there some place in the convocation as it now exists that you see that fitting?
I think I have to. There are many people here who have better ideas of the different convocation structures. So I'm not going to make a decision. I think that it's important that we find someone who wants to take a long-term commitment, so who will really be here for the next little while, and who's really interested in linking our various parishes together. This is a role not really about representation. It is a role about connection. So this could be someone who is based anywhere in Europe, not necessarily just in the offices. And I would also say that it's someone who will be interested in finding the resources and talents within the parish, because even within the convocation, because even here in our task force, we had uh, every member leading on their specific issues. So it will be important that that person also continues to work with people who are knowledgeable about welcoming, the communications committee that has a major role to play, and also with the Episcopal Church's charitable partners.
That's great. We have some questions coming in the Q&A. Thomas, I'm going to have you just start addressing them. In the meantime, we've had a request to show the resolutions that you proposed. So I'm going to bring that up on my screen and share that screen while you're addressing the questions. How's that?
Great.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so I see some practical questions like where would the budget for CCME be coming from, and what are the resolution numbers? So I guess, Bishop, you're showing the numbers about where the budget would come from. I would need also someone else to inform us. This is a quite reasonable amount of 400 euros a year, given the size of the convocation. So then I had a question about digital outreach. Question here is, do we know, especially for refugees, is a digital approach more feasible as they often arrive without money or technology with the needs to access it? Well, I think the first point I would say is if you build it, they will come. So if our parishes don't engage in digital outreach, they will not see who they are reaching. And the beauty of outreach, particularly through social media, is you are going to be reaching the kinds of people that you wouldn't normally reach. And by having someone looking at who you're reaching and how, you can also target your outreach. You might find partners, for example, maybe local NGOs that are interested in providing information, and you can relay information through them. So a digital approach helps you to overcome many barriers, but it's not, it doesn't happen on its own. It happens by continuing to find where people are. However, what I can tell you so I'm a migration researcher. I also work on a think tank on very practical levels. It is easier to reach migrants and refugees on digital channels through social media than through any other channel. It is easier to reach migrants and refugees through these channels than it is through official channels, through governments, through NGOs, because they will only have access to a limited number of people. And migrants and refugees who are coming to Europe do have digital connections. You might, though, again, depending on who you're trying to reach through your digital outreach, you might want to reconsider some of the formats of how you share online. So if you're having people who have less of an online connection, expecting them to have a good enough digital connection, like I had to do running around to get my internet box working, is quite an expectation. So it might be better to have shorter clips that they can watch at their own time. Having someone who's directly speaking to the audience, or other forms of more engaging social media than just scrolling through orders of service might also be necessary to overcome digital obstacles that migrants or refugees might face. Testing out different kinds of multilingual online videos might also be necessary. And again, we have examples of this in the parish. I also think the Latin American community in Orvieto and in Rome, if you go on their social media, you see they actually follow a lot of these guidelines that I just suggested. So you do have to think consciously about how you reach out, but if you reach out, you will be able to overcome a lot of the obstacles that we create by expecting everyone to come inside our doors. There's a question here about the resolution's workload and what to prioritize. No, I don't think this is a lot of a workload. We have really tried to be very comprehensive to help you come up with feasible steps. But when you realize what these steps are, they are very feasible. We'd like you to celebrate World Refugee Day, which is one day a year. We'd like you to have a welcomer, and we are going to be training and supporting that person. We'd like you to revamp your website and your social media, and the communications committee is there to help you. And if that is a problem, I think it's actually something to discuss more in depth with others, because if you don't have a website or social media, you are sending the message that your church is really only there for the existing community and for people who know what the Episcopal Church is. So it is an important priority, I would say, if you don't have that. And other than that, we're asking you to continue with your charitable work and making sure that it's relevant. So while it's very comprehensive, it's actually very small steps. But again, our first resolution is that you read the full report, reflect on it, and then make your own decisions. And we understand that you will make your own decisions based on your own context and on your means. These resolutions really are just helping you guide this process and make some specific concrete steps. Oh gosh, now there are a flood of questions, so I don't know if Bishop or Malia, you're seeing these questions and you can help me choose some.
Try the upvotes first.
Sorry, what did you say?
You'll see that some are getting upvoted, and that indicates that others have this same question for you.
Okay.
So here's a question from Katerina Ginzel about what the Committee on Mission Congregation is doing through the Subcommittee on Virtual Church. And Thomas, if I may, I'm going to give a first answer to that question, then ask you to follow and sort of clean up after me. So I think there's a real connection that we need to explore between the work your task force has done and the work the Committee on Mission Congregations does all the time. So we often think about outreach and ministry to migrants and refugees as something to be done within the context of our existing parishes. At the same time, there are communities that might form around ministry to these communities that would constitute a mission of themselves. And those missions wouldn't even necessarily have to be English speaking. Thomas Myers has a question in the list about, are we thinking about work among people who don't speak English? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Committee on Mission Congregations has been talking about the idea of virtual missions. So missions that meet together, worship together, pray together, create community together outside the walls of a physical church. And that could be one of the ways, using social media tools, as you've taught us, is the best way to connect with these folks, to begin creating communities that are mission-based communities and meet virtually. So and then the question would be, how do we connect those communities to our existing parishes and missions so that there's a tie, let's say, with folks who are meeting together physically. So that's one answer, and maybe you want to follow up on that and say a
Yeah.
little more.
Yeah, I mean, I would take it from the point of view of your communications strategy. And I mean, in that sense, it is related to evangelization. Who is the church for? And that's a question that applies both to missions and to parishes. Um, and your ability to connect with potentially interested people in a language other than English, it will depend on your own means and resources and leadership within your community, and also with the specific communities that you're trying to reach. So it would not be realistic to say, okay, guys, we can reach all migrant, refugee, and people of local backgrounds, because we will start to encounter language obstacles, right? And we might not have the leadership that is able, particularly if our leadership is coming from the United States, isn't multilingual, right? I mean, we need to have more local leaders who are more multilingual as well, in order to really reach the diversity of our local contexts. However, I would start from a more practical perspective, with what we have. English is a lingua franca that allows us to reach internationally oriented locals. English is a lingua franca that brings together many migrants and refugees who are not as fluent in the national or local language. And if we're not reaching those people already, we should start there. And as we start to have more local leaders within our parishes, we can also develop more multilingual outreach. And there are great examples of not only missions that are serving, let's say, what I call uprooted Anglicans. So people from the global Anglican communion who have come to Europe and find a home in the Episcopal Church. But also we have other models of parishes that have found ways of incorporating multiple languages in their services, adjusting the way that they use English so that it's easier for people with lower levels of fluency, maybe having specific services in different languages. So there are simple steps that you can take, and churches have different experiences with having separate services or combined services. Let me answer a few questions that I see here about the welcomer. We, as I said, have in the task force several members who have actually really practical advice on how welcomers can work. And so we would propose to offer a convocation-wide training for anyone in your parish who's interested in becoming a welcomer. And they will help to craft this role themselves. We definitely think it would be good to have these welcomers be your multilingual parishioners, people of diverse backgrounds who can connect to a wider audience. And so it would definitely be good to think about the diversity of people that you would bring in as a potential welcomer. And from this training, that welcomer will come back to your parish and find the right way of integrating a welcomer into the way that you do your normal Sunday worship, the way that your vestries work. So we understand that that role will adapt parish by parish.
I might hop in here, Thomas, and also address a question I'm seeing about the recommendations that are contained in the resolutions, and sort of what is the directionality between convocation and parish here. This is a sort of strange way of responding to that question, but sometimes I think that the role of the convocation in our life as the church in Europe is a little bit like what Walter Bagehot wrote in his great study about the Constitution of England as the rights of the monarch. The rights of the monarch in England are to be informed, to encourage, and to warn. And that's all. That's it. But that is, in fact, often what we do. We have the right to be informed. The bishop has the right to be informed. We ask for your parochial reports. We want to know what's happening. Council advice has a system of liaisons that check in with our wardens and our vicars and rectors all the time. We have the right to encourage, and one of the ways we do that is to set standards that we hope everybody will attain to, or at least be aware of, and ask themselves, could we be doing better at this? And we have the right to warn. We have the right to say, we've really got to focus on something. This is a problem. We need to attend to it. So I guess my sense about the value of resolutions, we asked all of our task forces to think about giving us resolutions to focus on in this meeting. And we've seen the fruit of what resolutions do by virtue of the task forces themselves. So I think it is the right thing for us to be called to account in resolutions. That's how we work as an Episcopal Church. To come specifically to some of the questions that are posed in the resolutions, some of them are directly on the convocation, the question of the convocation itself becoming a member of CCME. I personally, as one vote in the room, think that's an excellent idea. I think it's something that makes sense for us to do at the level of the convocation and not individual parishes. But I'm also a believer in subsidiarity. And so I think that we look for creativity at the parish level and we share practices around the convocation. What our structures are good for is connecting people who are committed and passionate to different ministries with each other so that they share ideas.
Yeah, and I would just add as well that when you read the resolutions, they are largely asking you to make choices. And those choices that you make are just yours to be transparent about, and to then be able to be connected more to other parishes and to someone at the convocation level in the form of the officers and to the communications committee. I mean, you can read this report and you can decide, well, actually, we have other priorities for our charitable outreach, and I'm fine that our church sends the message that it's predominantly for the existing community and for people who know what the Episcopal Church is. That's fine with me. And, you can be, I would call that from my migration research, an expat church. And you can be an excellent expat church if that's what you want, for people who know who you are. But I think that by reading this report and by going through the steps that the resolution asks you to go through, you will maybe find some ways that you want to make changes and improvements. So these are really a structure and not forcing down any one path for your parish. Some parishes might, from this, again, choose to become a great expat church. Others might want to become more linked into the global Anglican communion, being more multilingual, but perhaps still really remaining for people who understand the Episcopal Church. Others might want to remain as they are, but be better at communications, so everyone really knows who they are. They're kind of a local beacon. And others might try and take here and there from the results in order to find out how they can really show that they are a new local church that is really part of their local community and is multilingual and is also accessible. And those are all choices that are valid, and the resolutions will allow you to do all of those things.
Could you, Thomas, could you address the question I'm seeing about the criteria for the survey results and sort of what went into the scores? How are we going to understand ourselves and evaluate ourselves as a parish?
Sure. I mean, so my background as a migration researcher is on benchmarking. I harmonize statistics on immigrant integration, on integration policies, on what organizations do. So the quantitative approach comes from me, but it's also what my PhD and work is about. This is very simple. In the survey that we sent out to all of you as parishes, we asked you 5 questions. Does your parish have a strategy on charity? Does your parish have a strategy on reaching out to newcomer expats, to newcomer migrants, on welcoming? And based on what you answered qualitatively, I just indicated, does this parish say that they have a strategy? Do they have an ad hoc set of elements, or do they not have something? So what you see there is reflected in what you have shared with us. And in the section on digital outreach, you'll also see that we looked at your social media and website based on a set of very simple criteria. You know, does the website and social media have this element or that element or this element or that element? Is it fully or partly present? And this is really just to help you have an independent look, to see how you might appear to a newcomer, to someone who is not like you. So this is not some kind of a ranking, but it is helpful for you to see where might be potential strengths and weaknesses. And I can say, having worked in an international context, it is extremely helpful to have this outside perspective, because sometimes we get so stuck into the way that we work, what we think is possible and not possible, that we don't pay enough attention to things that we're not doing. And again, you might choose to say, well, actually, we think it makes sense that we're not doing this, and we just have a better justification and thought process for it. Or maybe you say, I never really thought about this, and now you tell me that actually a parish in my own country or in another country has this element. And now, because we have these comparisons, you can actually go directly and see on the website of this parish or in the social media of that parish what they're doing. So I really hope that you use this as an opportunity for mutual learning.
That's great. I'm going to come to some of these questions quickly. We're coming up to 5 minutes left in this session. There's a question about the sensitivity of data. We certainly are aware of that. As a general rule, we think it's pretty good guidance to say everything we collect should be anonymized always to the greatest extent possible. That's certainly going to be the case, I know, in the survey that's being done by our folks in the Racism and Reconciliation Task Force. So yes, we're aware of that. It's probably the case that local folks, people on the ground in various jurisdictions, are better equipped to understand the interstices of GDPR requirements in a given country than the convocation will be. We don't have deep expertise on GDPR requirements in the specific entities that we work in. We're developing a general set of guidance with the Episcopal Church about that. So yes, we'll do that. I'm also seeing a question about.
Can I just, sorry, just can I briefly
Yeah,
reply to
please.
that? Because actually I am an expert on GDPR and its relationship to equality data. Because as I say, I work on migration integration statistics and also equality data statistics. So just to say, really nothing in the migration or refugees report or resolutions in any way relates to GDPR. We're not asking for any type of survey or personalized information. The only thing we're asking for is, for example, to know, the numbers of new members that might come in every year, which is, again, just a number. It's not related to any individual information. However, you can collect equality data all across Europe that is compliant with GDPR. It's even recommended by the European Commission. So if this is something that you want to do to better get information on the diversity of your parish, I'm working with the anti-racism survey task force as well on this, but I'm also willing to give individual advice to parishes.
That's great. Thank you. Can you come to the question about integration?
Yeah, so this is really also related to welcoming. So again, Wasim and Kim found very practical examples from the convocation where you need to realize that a lot of newcomers who would be coming to our parishes actually might not have a lot of information about the choices that they're going to be making to settle in the country, in the area, and places they can join. For some people, that's the opposite. Maybe joining the Episcopal Church is one of the last things they do in their settlement. For many other people, it's one of the first things they might do. And even if they've been there for a while, there are certain maybe activities that people didn't think were possible because they didn't get the right information. So a welcomer could be looking for the kind of basic information that newcomers might need and make sure that the parish provides that somewhere. So it could be on the website or in a welcoming pack, like is done very well by Clermont-Ferrand. Or it could be having a notice board with basic information. It could be putting these things together in one kind of pack. It could be information that parish leaders provide to others orally, but it's really useful for newcomers to be able to come to our parish and find out about, say, local free language classes, integration services that are available, English speaking groups and services that are available, and not just social services, but for example, where can I find mental health services in my area that are in English? I might only be able to ask that question when I come to church. Or where can I find out about services for people who are suffering from domestic violence that are also multilingual, right? So these are, again, a welcomer who is there will be listening to the kinds of questions that newcomers are having and just making sure that they're asking around, building your church's network and providing information in the appropriate way.
That's great. Thank you. And finally, we have a question about public advocacy, which is an excellent question. I think there's a piece of that that needs to be owned by the convocation. There's a piece of that that our parishes are probably better situated to do than the convocation is. But we should work together on these things. There will be those who feel strongly about a given issue in the public discourse that we want to encourage them to feel empowered to speak to. There will be others who won't feel that that's part of their Christian witness, and that's okay too. But what we need to do, again, I think, is form a community of practice around advocacy and bring those folks together. Thomas, thank you so much. What an excellent report from your task force. Thank you to all of the members of your task force who contributed to the video that we saw. All of this material is going to be made available, and somebody asked in the Q&A specifically about your report, which I think is going to be the first publication of the Convocation of Episcopal Churches in Europe. We're going to make sure that all of our communities have access to a copy. I thank you so much for that. We're now going into a tech break, and I'm going to mute myself and hand over to those who know what the break is about. Thomas, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.